I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness. And before we get started, for those of you who have been asking me and are curious about our new kitten, Walter Croncat, he is doing so well. And I'm going to do a little kitty pun because I can. My best friend was like, so is he going to start a podcast and talk about the muse? Anyway, I always love those. I love a good dad joke and puns and things like that. So anyway, I wanted to share those with you guys, but he's doing great. He's settling in. Him and our puppy isn't 3 years old, are doing really well. They're like best buds already. So phew, that's a load off of our shoulders, considering our dog was looking at him like he was a little snack when he first arrived. Anyway, I'm excited. Let's get into the show because we have an amazing guest for you guys, Andrea Beach, and I'm just going to bring her on. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Julianne. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to this conversation since the first time we spoke, and here we are. So, I know a bit about you, but not everybody does. So I would love if you'd share with the audience a bit about yourself.
Sure. So pretty humble beginnings. Grew up in a broken home without much opportunity. We were pretty broke. Not a lot laid out in the way of a life plan for me. So most of it was figuring it out on my own. That means a lot of trial and error. I was always entrepreneurial, trying to sell my toys to neighborhood kids or, sell candy at school back when we could still do that kind of thing. Worked my way all the way through school, ended up at University of Georgia as an international business major, but still didn't know what I wanted to do because ultimately I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I just couldn't find the right lane. So I meandered around in sales and ended up in technology. It was a complete accident. I thought I was building something else and everybody I kept talking to was having challenges on the technology side. So I thought, well, I'll solve that problem so I can get to what I really want to talk about. Come to find out 3 years of doing that, I was really in technology and custom software and realized, well, maybe I should make a business out of that. So several different iterations of technology companies and other types of businesses from sales and marketing to other platforms, had definitely more mediocre and failure type businesses than successes, but had a few big wins and learned along the way. I've always been an avid learner, study of people that knew what they were doing in different fields. And so I'm constantly watching podcasts, going to seminars, reading books, and trying to apply those things. And lucky enough to say that I've been able to build a few companies. I currently have 5 that are a little bit diverse, but they're all still within business and predominantly technology. But I realized that's not enough just to have financial success. I really needed the balance in my life. I wanted a strong love relationship. I wanted to continue to have amazing relationships with my children, who are all now getting older and moving on, as well as extended family and friends. I wanted wellness. I wanted to feel healthy and youthful and really enjoy my life. And I didn't want to work all the time. So I redesigned my life a few years ago to where I can now pretty much work from anywhere in the world. I can work alongside the people that I love and really enjoy life while still earning passive incomes and doing things that light my fire.
First of all, kudos on having 5 businesses. I mean, as a woman, that's considered unusual. So you're breaking barriers, which is awesome. But the thing that really impresses me is this realization that that's not everything, not anywhere near everything. I mean, I'd be a liar if I said money wasn't important, because it is, and it affords us to have experiences and things like that, and pay our bills and all other, things that are important to wellness as well. But to really realize that you wanted something else, something more, I love that. And how have you created this life? I mean, I know that you can work anywhere, but what does wellness look like to you?
Wellness is freedom for me. So freedom for my time. If I have a passion, if I go see a movie or read a book or encounter somebody in my daily travels and that inspires or excites me and ignites some kind of fire in me, I want to chase it. I want to have the time. I want to have the freedom to be able to go explore that and go as wide and deep as I want in that arena without being encumbered. I don't want to punch a time clock. I don't want to have to be beholden to someone else's schedule. And so to me, wellness really is that freedom holistically to just go take a nap, That's what I need. And I'm constantly asking myself and everyone around me, what is the highest and best use of my time right now? And every once in a while, it's a nap. Every once in a while, it's, I don't know, retail therapy. Every once in a while, it's, I just need a bowl of ice cream. Like whatever that is, that's wellness for me, is the freedom to be able to take care of myself emotionally, spiritually. Obviously, it's a physical thing as well. Without the physical health, the rest will suffer. And to your point, you can't do a lot of that if you don't have the finances.
Exactly. And something that I always like to talk about is the idea that lack of symptoms does not equal wellness. So
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean that you're doing the best. And, I like this idea too that you're saying about eating the bowl of ice cream or taking the nap, because it's not necessarily indulgent.
Right.
I mean, to just be able to do that and to not vilify those actions, or like there's something that's extravagant and maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Man, I lived in Europe. You eat pastries for breakfast and you go home at lunch and all these things. And like here in the United States, it's considered lazy.
Right. Yeah, but you're also walking everywhere and up and down stairs over there. So it helps.
That is true. And the food is healthier there too, just better quality. So that does help. But I'm curious too, because I know that in this quest of wellness for yourself, that you have wanted to give back some of this knowledge to other people. And how does that look for you?
So I got to the point where I was ignoring my health and I was faking it. And so I had this outward appearance to, including friends and family, to the world that, I was okay. But you're right. If you don't see symptoms, it doesn't mean you're necessarily well. And so about 8-9 years ago now, I started really addressing publicly and intentionally my own balanced wellness. And I got more excited every time I would talk to people that I met or knew and loved about how to help them with their spiritual journey or their physical health or whatever it was, their relationships. And I realized I have a lot more to offer because I've been through the trenches and, figured it all out really the hard way. I kind of have a whole closet of t-shirts of like, don't do that. So my plan or my goal was really to help other women, especially men too, but I'm very focused on helping women who kind of get to the middle of their life and go, this isn't quite the fairy tale I thought it was going to be. And maybe they're disappointed or frustrated in their career, but they've been in the same job for 30 years. They don't know how to do anything else. Or maybe they're single again in middle age. Wow, it's a whole different ballgame now. Or maybe they're in a relationship that's boring or, it's tired or it's kind of lost the fizzle, or they lack purpose. They lack that well-being. They're probably empty nesters or about to be. And there's this interesting identity crisis that happens when that happens, if they're no longer Jason's mom. So I really wanted to figure out how I could take everything I'd learned, the 30 plus years of me figuring it out the hard way and interviewing and talking to friends and people who'd made it. And I don't mean made it financially. I mean, made it holistically, where they were completely healthy and happy in their life and lived with that sunshine ray of joy everywhere they went. And I thought, how do I give that back? How do I help other women? So I just recently launched a new endeavor. I'm so excited about this. I'm more passionate about this than I have been any other company I've ever had. This, I believe, is my mission and my life purpose, and it's called Life Unleashed.
I love that. And you actually have a YouTube channel too. So I wanted to make sure we pop that up. We're going to pop it up again later. But what does Life Unleashed look like? Because you've been talking about all these wonderful things, but what does that mean? Like, are there steps? Is it a community?
Sure. So it is a community, which is part of the beautiful aspect of it, because we need that. I think especially as women, we need that. We need to be able not only to share our frustrations and kind of seek out help, but we need people to champion our efforts along the way. But I did put it into more of a structured format because maybe you have different areas of your life that you're a little frustrated or disappointed, but there's usually one that's really bothering you, at least at a time. So the goal was to give people a doorway they could come in. Maybe they need a love life breakthrough. they're single and seeking a relationship, and especially very success-minded women, female professionals sometimes think, I've got it all figured out. Why can't I find a good man? What in the world's going on? And there's a lot of answers to that. I actually have a pretty specific, tried and true formula for finding the right kind of love of your life. And then I have one on relationships. So reviving a relationship, how to make sure one's really healthy and nurtured, proven steps, fast conflict resolution that really, really works. It's amazing. I talk about everything. Amazing sex. I talk about how you have to have your own well-being in order to be a good partner. It's pretty holistic. But then some people say, no, my love life is great. They don't want to go in through that love life breakthrough door. They instead say, I'm just frustrated in my career. I don't know what to do. All this AI and new machine learning, what's that mean for me? So I have a whole nother side, which is more focused anyway on career, business, and entrepreneurship. And there's several different master classes, there's mini courses, there's just pieces of focus content. For example, advanced negotiation tactics. There's one on how to spot a liar. There's some pretty interesting ones in there. So then they can kind of buy into that ecosystem if they're interested. And then maybe later in life, they want to look towards something else. And then, of course, there's one on purpose-driven life. Because if you don't know your purpose and it doesn't then inform your mission, it makes everything else harder. And I have so many women that say, I don't know my purpose. I'm embarrassed to admit, not only do I not know, I don't know how to know what it would be. So I have this step-by-step process to help discover your purpose.
That one really speaks to me because I hear that all the time, the whole idea of purpose. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think that there's one purpose for your entire life, or can it change?
Oh, absolutely not. I think there are ebbs and flows. I think there's different journeys that we all go on. And throughout our life, we have different missions and our purpose changes. Now, we probably have a common thread throughout our life. I mean, if we've always, loved animals, I know you're a big animal lover too, just like I am. And, I always ask people, what breaks your heart? Like, what would you spend hours talking about, and what would you do if money was no issue or object? Like, what would you spend your time doing? And, for some people, they would say, I would rescue every animal I could, or, I'd have 20 dogs and cats or whatever. So that's pretty much a theme throughout your whole life. You don't just wake up in your 40s and say, now I think I'm going to focus on animals. No, there's common themes, but your purpose may change throughout different stages or phases of your life. And therefore your mission changes specifically with your experience to inform how you then make a difference in the world.
Do you find that people get stuck in this idea that their purpose is one thing and therefore they don't want to decide because then they feel locked in, like this is it?
Absolutely. And they're scared of it because they also think, first of all, I don't even know, how do I know it's really my purpose? Why do I have to pick one, to your point? And then they think, what if I'm not good at it? Or what if I don't uphold it? So if I name it, now I have an expectation, or now what if I fail? I pointed to something that now I can raise the bar or fail to or exceed. And I don't think a lot of people want to actually admit that.
I think that that's a really good point, because I know for me, I just really thought, especially with business, having a plan, that it was very linear, that business was linear. I go from here to there. I mean, you're like all over the place. You have to go detour over here to get there. But you didn't know when you started that you were going to be doing that.
Yes. And even adding to that, sometimes I've looked back and I thought, what did this detour have anything to do with this weird thing over there? They're totally unrelated. But now when I look back at the tapestry of my life, I realize I needed to learn that and have that experience in order to be able to do whatever this next thing is. But that takes hindsight. So sometimes it takes a little courage.
It's funny. I always talk about how I worked in addiction recovery because I have a past history of drinking. I thought, I went to rehab, and everybody in rehab was like, oh, I'm going to work in addiction recovery, blah, blah, blah. That's just like the thing that most people say. And I said, oh, not me. I will never do that. Meanwhile, I ended up working in addiction recovery for 6 years. So it was just one of these things where it's like, I don't really want to be doing this, but I was called to do it. And then I didn't understand why I was doing it until later. And I really realized that the purpose of me being there in that position that I swore I never wanted to do was that I gained thick skin that I didn't have before that I need for now.
Yes, true. And some parts of our path we choose,
Yeah,
and others choose us. And,
exactly.
it's a matter of not necessarily getting stuck, but not getting into a rut with something. I mean, you did that for 6 years, and then
Yeah.
you said, okay, I'm good, time for a change. And sometimes that happens because outside forces, we get whatever it is, laid off or divorced or something happens. But other times we realize, oh, I think I'm good. I've learned all I need to learn here. It's time to move on.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of the times, speaking about this idea of being Jason's mom and Jason growing up, it's the same. Like I was, attached to my title. I was attached to my status at my job there, and I stayed longer than I probably should have because I was used to it, and all these. I mean, I knew it. I was comfortable enough. It was good enough. All these things,
Part
but
of
yeah,
your identity.
yeah, it became part of who I was as opposed to something I did.
Mhm.
Have you ever run into that with yourself, or is it?
Yeah, I think I have. So I raised 9 kids, actually. I had 6, so 3 of my own, 3 stepchildren, and then just because of circumstances, several others. And so part of me had that mama bear, that was my identity, and I had way too many kids to say I'm, Jason's mom, for example, but that was part of my identity. And now all my kids are up and out, very healthy, very balanced. My youngest is 16 and she's extremely independent. So you kind of move your identity even within a role. So that happened again in technology, I mentioned. And then I realized it's not just business, it's not just technology, because I started in sales and marketing. And then I, came up and found my success in business with technology, but then branched out because one thing we didn't talk about was my background in behavior
Mm.
and NLP and certified in DHE and certified hypnotherapist and stuff. I've always loved behavior and what makes people tick. And I didn't cross those streams until much later in life, where I actually had to call on some of those skills and resources in my business or in my career. And then I realized, why am I limiting myself? And so I put the limitations on myself, those titles and those roles. And so I've had a few, breakout moments of my own to where now I'm constantly pushing myself. Am I limiting myself? No, let's just go crazy and try something over there just to see if I can do it. It's like being a little kid playing pretend.
I love that. On that note, we are going to go to a commercial break, so we'll be back in just a minute. And for those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, we do need to go to a commercial. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to dive deep into this idea of breaking through those limitations and what that looks like to actually reinvent yourself. We'll be back in just a moment.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring Andrea back to the show. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So during the commercial break, I was thinking about this whole idea of how you said that you put the limits on yourself and how I think everyone does that to some extent. We think of ourselves in a certain way. We get used to thinking of ourselves in a certain way and maybe even forgetting about parts of ourselves. Like you mentioned, oh yeah, I have a background in this, this, and this, and I didn't marry them together until later. But what was that like for you? Did you run up against any resistance from the people around you whenever you started to do this sort of thing for yourself?
So I was actually in a meeting with Coca-Cola, and it's fine. I know I can mention them because we've talked about it since then and laughed over the story. We had done a ton of work for them, a lot of consumer activation. So we had done stuff like NBA All-Stars and March Madness and what have you. And they wanted us to do, to build something, I'll say, I don't want to go into detail, for March Madness. And it was not going to work. And I knew it wasn't going to work technologically, but more importantly, it wasn't going to work behaviorally because what they were trying to accomplish just wasn't possible. So I said, no, thank you. And I slid the document back across this very big, impressive boardroom table. And they said, no, you don't understand. Like, it's yours. We just need you to do this RFP. And I said, no, you don't understand. It's going to fail. And here's all the reasons why it's going to fail. And I felt very confident saying this because I knew what I was talking about. But also, I had already done a bunch of work with them. And I didn't really worry so much about like job security or like keeping that account. I really, truly wanted to do what was going to be best for them. And I said, this isn't going to work. And I explained why. They got pretty upset because I was explaining it from a behavioral aspect, not a technological aspect. And I said, you're in Atlanta. I said, there are a lot of companies that'll put themselves out of business to build what you're wanting to do. It's still going to fail. I said, so we're just not going to put our name on it. So they got so mad that they stormed out of the room. And our agency partners just went white in the face, and they just thought, oh, great, what did you do? Well, they ended up hiring another company that I actually knew, the owner, and it failed. They had all the struggles I thought they were going to have. I hate, saying I told you so, but that was the case. And they came back a year later and said, so what was that you're talking about with all the behavioral stuff? And from that moment on, I never again did an RFP, because I realized that so much of my knowledge was on the behavioral side and actually putting the recipe together, not necessarily cooking it. And I really leaned into the behavioral side and the aspect. And that's when I hit that hockey stick and kind of got my first real taste of big success, because I wasn't denying that part of me, that side of me that was so intrinsic.
I love that. And that's also and that's why I like how you picked Life Unleashed, because we have it in us. But it's like you mentioned before, this idea of we haven't been able to figure it out, or there's something holding us back. There's some sort of limitation. And I guess my question for you is, you mentioned with Life Unleashed that there's like the personal side and the professional side, but it obviously goes together because it's your life, right?
Right.
So my question about that in particular is, there's always been this big debate, and this is a personal thing. You don't have to be right, but your opinion is, can you have it all?
I absolutely believe you can have it all. I'm living proof. I mean, I'm sitting here living the life that I never even dreamed I could possibly have. And I think a lot of the limitations or reasons that people have trouble even envisioning what they might do next. You mentioned reinventing themselves. Middle age is the perfect time for people to reinvent themselves because they have all the wisdom and knowledge, and they're usually in the best financial state they've ever been in. They still have the energy, and now they've got more time to be able to do it. Let's go. Like, this is the time. But what happens is when we're little kids, we say, I'm going to be an astronaut when I grow up, or I'm going to whatever. And they never stop to consider how. They don't care how. They just say, I'm just going to do that. And then somewhere along the way, we're conditioned to say, oh, I don't know that we know how to do that. Or if I don't know how, then maybe it's not possible. So I try to eliminate the how. First thing I think about is, what do I want the outcome to be? What do I want to do? And then I think, oh, that's the why, and what is it about that lights me up and makes me excited? So if I say I want to travel more, because that was something about 8-9 years ago, I said I was going to travel, and I've
Mhm.
really been anywhere. So I said I'm going to travel more, and that was, why do I want to do that? I want to explore other cultures. I want the freedom. I want to understand the world better. I had no idea how that was going to happen. So then I
Mhm.
backed into the how after I knew the what and the why.
And that's how I like to do life. Makes it so much more fun because it's amazing how things open up once you make a firm decision about, but that's what it is. It has to be firm. It can't be wishy-washy, like maybe someday.
No, no.
I
What's the
like that.
difference in a dream or a wish and a goal?
Exactly. Exactly. So obviously right now Life Unleashed is it's your baby,
Mhm.
and it is something that lights your fire, and you guys are doing all sorts of exciting revamping and all that. So for those that are watching, go back to the website more than once. Go back and definitely check out YouTube, because I actually was on your YouTube today, by the way.
Okay.
So it's good. For those of you who are watching, it's good.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I always want to make sure that who I'm talking with, I don't want to promote something that I wouldn't stand behind. So, but out of all of the women that you help, you mentioned midlife, like people, empty nesters are about to be. Do you think that people who are younger could also be experiencing these things, but maybe not even aware yet?
I think a lot of them are aware. So what's interesting is that when I go places, especially when I speak, I end up with these young girls. I say young, 16, 17, up to late 20s. And they say, well, what about us? Can you help us? Because they say dating is harder than we ever thought it would be. And then they talk about the challenges with that. They say school didn't really prepare me for what I want to do. I don't even know what all the possibilities are. So how can I
Mhm.
possibly choose? They don't know what they need to do for happiness, health, wellness, because they just really weren't taught. So I get asked by young ladies all the time, for the same exact help. So honestly, I really think it's for anyone. And it's not just women. I have a
Yeah.
lot of men that follow us. I mean, I'm focused on women because I am a woman. I'm literally drunk on the Kool-Aid. I mean, I'm more relatable, but I have so many men that say this helped me unbelievably, because we're humans. We all struggle with the same challenges, and we're all looking for those helping hands to give us those breakthrough moments. I think people want to reinvent themselves. They want to feel passionate again. They just don't
Mhm.
know how.
Or they don't think that, because the way that I grew up, it was very blue collar, and it's just this idea of live for the weekend, live for retirement, and that's all there is. And I'm not going to put down my parents at all, but I just didn't want that for myself.
Right.
And
Reading menus right to left, constantly worried about we can't afford that, and actually kind of making fun of people that were well off.
oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That was the
Mhm.
norm. Or they're evil. This is so funny. I got to share this story with you because it's really funny. I remember one time, well, and I also remember being told this later, so maybe that's what I remember. But my mom, my mom passed away when I was 14, so I was definitely under that because it has to do with her. So I was young, and we were with family friends, and my mom used to always say after a good meal, "I wonder what the poor people are eating." And I think back, oh, cringe. But the father of my friend looks around, he goes, "Corn," and like at the table, and starts pointing out the food. And I just thought that was really sad but funny. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think
My
about
dad used to say the exact same thing, especially when we had a really good spread, like
it.
at Thanksgiving or on a Sunday afternoon. He actually had the exact same expression. That's too funny. He still says it to this day.
I'm sure my mom would too.
Mhm.
But it's kind of fascinating, just this idea, this unhealthy relationship with money and with settling. I mean, I think that we're taught to settle just as people, not, I mean, women
Sure.
especially, but um, no matter what it is, it could be relationships, it could be career, it could be love, all of these things. Do you think that, because I just got married, as you know, recently, and so I'm all on the love high and all that, but things didn't really change after I got married as far as, feeling, or I mean, it just feels the same to me. But what I have, I know not other people do have. And so what you teach is more like, you can have that dream relationship. You are allowed to have that. You do deserve that. You are good enough now with all your so-called flaws. Right?
Yes, and I think you struck a chord with me a second ago that I hadn't thought about, which is we're taught to settle, but at the same time, this mantra of be grateful for what you have, as though somehow you can't be grateful for what you have and still striving for more. It was almost like you had to either be grateful or you're not grateful because you're wanting more. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because I think the more grateful and appreciative we are of what we have today, the easier it is to find the success, whether it's money or love or wellness or anything else. Those two things don't have to live separate. In fact, they shouldn't.
I agree. And you know what? That's something my mom used to say to me too. Oh my goodness, you should be grateful.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's a big one for me too. There's nothing wrong with wanting more. In fact, we should, as long as we're alive.
Perfectly happy with what we have as well. I'm thrilled about the things that I have. I still want more. I will always strive and want more, but I will always every day be grateful for what I have.
Yeah. And there's, to me, a huge difference between wanting more in order to be okay with ourselves versus loving what we have, loving who we are, and wanting more.
Yes. And the more I get, the more I can give. When I have financial freedom, I can give it away. I can start orphanages. I can build businesses along with small entrepreneurs that maybe needed a little influx of capital, and they wouldn't have had a leg up any other way. I mean, I can make donations. I can give all my money away to the church. I can do things because I have the freedom to make those choices. I don't know, people talk all the time, especially growing up, but money doesn't buy happiness. Well, neither does poverty.
No.
Right?
No, it might not buy happiness, but it buys you a place to live.
Right. It buys you opportunities. It buys you different decisions and choices.
Exactly. Like, I never would have been able to live in Europe as long as I did had I not had money. And that experience changed me on a cellular level and gave me such a different perspective that it was worth every single penny I spent living there, because and I didn't want to come back, to be honest with you. I loved it. But yeah, I have a huge problem with people thinking you're greedy because you want more or you have a lot.
Right.
It does, you don't win a medal for having less. You don't win one for having more either. But
well, I found it's unfortunate, but as my success grew, and that was more than just financial success, the opportunities for me grew, because those things kind of come hand in hand.
They go together.
I saw that assumptions were made about me that weren't true. They assumed I was a workaholic, that all I ever did was work. And so some of my girlfriends stopped calling to ask if I wanted to go out or go on that girls' trip or do whatever. When I confronted them and said, what the heck's going on? They said, well, we just figured you're working yourself around the clock. I mean, working yourself to the bone. And in fact, I had built the business model to work less, but they've made an assumption. And there's also this assumption that, I don't know, I feel like I'm better. It's like, oh, you have that. So you think you're all that. No, actually, it's made me more humble, because, coming through all the trials and tribulations I've had to get through to get to where I am, I'm more of a humanitarian. I'm more humble, and honestly, more of a servant's heart than I ever had.
Well, exactly. You're not fighting to survive. Right. You can focus on other things because you're not in survival mode, and I think about people like Steve Harvey, for example. A lot of people don't know he lived in his car for years. So it's like, would you begrudge him his success, or does it make it more acceptable because he struggled so hard in the beginning? I mean, why do we have, I know that I was guilty of that too. I know I was, but the more that I have created in my own life and experienced different things, the more I realize that, you know, money is not the root of all evil. Having no money is actually where problems really come up.
Right. And your point about giving you more time to focus on other people and other things like your wellness and things that really matter, spiritual endeavors or, emotional maturity, you don't get that bandwidth until you've covered your expenses and you are at least some level of stable.
Exactly. And, I just think about that whole idea. Was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If you could do that and you're taking care of that, it's kind of, once those are all taken care of, it's so much easier. First of all, you're going to feel better too. And then when you're not, because you actually lose IQ points. I think it's like 95%. I mean, it's really high. When you're in that survival mode, you actually can't see the options that are in front of you. And it's really hard to break free from that cycle. But yeah, I'm glad that you are showing that it's all possible. And it's interesting because there's so many people out there that are, I wonder too, riddle me this. Do people assume that you are aggressive and mean because you're successful and you're a woman, so you have to be?
Not only do they assume that often, but there was an element of truth to that I had to learn and overcome in early days. Now, remember, I started in business and technology. I mean, I could count on one hand how many females were in technology in the year 2000. And we considered ourselves kind of frenemies. We pretended to love each other, but then we'd be like watching each other's career and, we're pretty jealous. But every room I walked into was all men. And I mistakenly thought that I had to act masculine. I showed up in my boxy suits and I did the firm handshake and I was really aggressive. And I mean, maybe I won a few battles, but I think I lost a few wars that way. I can tell some pretty embarrassing stories about how over masculine and overbearing I tried to be a few times and how it backfired on me. But I didn't realize that I could be myself. I could be soft. I could be feminine and I could relax into my power. I thought in order to compete in what at the time was a man's world, there's a ton of females in technology now, but there weren't 25 years ago. And it took me longer than I want to admit that when I actually relaxed into my feminine and became much more balanced and true, honestly, to who I really was, it's when things started clicking. It's when things started flowing. And I wish I learned that earlier. But that is something that I help women with, especially strong alpha female, kind of boss babes. I'm not a fan of that term, but that level of woman who is very aggressive. And then they wonder why they don't have a good marriage or they can't find a good man. And I have we could talk for hours about that, but I do address that. And I have on that Love Life Breakthrough, a lot of it on Single and Seeking is about women that don't understand that yet.
I think that's really important too, because I know there's been so many times where I have been the only female, because the only female in certain arenas. And I really thought that I had to conform in order to. So I'm so glad that you brought up and mentioned your struggle and how you realize I'm here. And and I don't even know if you realize it in this way, but like, if I'm more me, then I'm going to be more powerful. I think you just, but it works.
That's what happened.
It works. And something that my business partner, he's known for unignorable. That's his trademark. And his idea is that you just be as good, the best you, and people will not be able to ignore you. But if you're trying to stand out, if you're trying, then you're never going to be successful. Not in the way that you could be anyway.
Right, exactly.
I love that. On that note, we do need to go to our last commercial break. So we'll be back in just a moment. And I said hello to everybody who's watching us live. Now it's my turn to say hello to everybody who's watching us on demand. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this love aspect of everything, not only in other relationships, but with ourselves. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversations. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring Andrea back to the show. Welcome back. So as I mentioned before we went to break, I like this idea of speaking more into the love relationship, because I think that is something that it seems impossible, or like there isn't a way to get it, or only the lucky end up with that. But I'm with you. I think that that you can. This is something that you can create in your life. It doesn't, I mean, obviously there's free will, but but there's things that you can do for yourself. And how did that come about for you, as in figuring out, for lack of better terminology, steps?
Because I did it wrong every possible way. That's how it came about. I made every mistake there was to make, I think. And so after my divorce, I really struggled for a while. For years, I didn't date at all. I wasn't even interested. I really wanted to focus on me. I focused on my children. I was rebuilding another business. And that time was invaluable because I needed to work on me. You know, I needed some time to think about, who am I, but who do I really want to be? Not just for me personally. Who do I want to be for the world? Who I want to be for my kids? And redefining and getting a clear vision on what the best me looked like was honestly probably the best decision I made during a sea of really bad decisions. I did spend some time, really reevaluating what I want out of a love partner as well. Because I think anytime you come out of a bad relationship or off the back end of a divorce, even if it's amicable, you think, well, that's not what I wanted. So what do I want? And I think it's great to get really clear. I mean, I actually wrote out a list, and the list was a combination of things that I wanted that were for my own fulfillment, and the things that I wanted that were more tactical. I wanted somebody who was gainfully employed. They didn't need to be a multimillionaire. They didn't need to make as much money or have as much success as me. But I wanted them to have a passion. I wanted them to have a purpose so that they weren't adrift in their life. I'm also very attracted to people that have a purpose about their life because they're magnetic. And so this list that I created, I really wasn't willing to settle on that list. And I think a lot of women that I talk to get lonely, a lot of men too, and they're willing to excuse away red flags and to settle. And so that's the first place that I started, was working on me to be the happiest, healthiest, most whole, balanced version of myself that I could be, and get out of survival mode. I got myself to a really healthy place. And then I went, what do I really want? Why? Why do I want that? And then why do I want that? Well, why is that important? And I dug and dug and dug and dug until then I created that list and said, I'm not willing to settle until I find it.
I love that. I was thinking about one of my old friends from high school, and she was my best friend for eons. And when we were like, I don't know, 19, 20 years old, she met her husband. And but before she met him, she didn't date a lot, and she was lonely, and she was dating this really nice guy, but he wasn't going to be the one, and that she married, and she broke up with him. She would rather have been alone than be with the wrong guy. And I remember at the time thinking, what's wrong with you? You like him, you have fun. I mean, there was nothing wrong with what was going on, and it didn't make any sense to me. But then she ended up meeting her husband like 2 weeks later.
Well,
Because
first
she,
of all, good for her,
yeah,
especially being so young that she was so secure and balanced and knew what she wanted that she wasn't willing to
yeah.
settle. That's pretty rare.
I know. I look back now and I'm so impressed with that. But at the time, I was thinking, girl, there's not that many people interested in you. Why aren't you going out with him? Blah, blah, blah. I'm just like being a teenager,
Mhm. And I have people all the time that say, isn't being with someone better than being alone? And I emphatically say, absolutely not. Fall in love with yourself. Go do things that light you up. Find new hobbies, make new friends, spend time alone. Do you know how many people have a really hard time being alone with themselves? And if you can get to the point where you say, I really appreciate and value my alone time, you then don't feel as lonely. So now when you finally meet a good guy, you're not like a Klingon desperate for his attention because you're living a pretty good life. And
Yeah.
until you've got that balance, you're not really ready to find that person. And to your point, if you're in the wrong relationship, just treading water, killing time, you're not out dating, or at least you shouldn't be unless you're cheap all by yourself. You're not in the pool. You're not available. And therefore, you're not putting out that right energy to the universe to attract the right kind of person. So it is definitely better to be alone, not lonely, to be alone than with the wrong person.
Exactly. She wouldn't have seen him if she'd been in this other relationship with this other guy, because why would she have even, like you said, she wouldn't have been putting out the right energy. I think that's really important too, because I think a lot of us are so afraid that the right person for us isn't going to come around or along. So we end up being with Mr. Right Now.
Right. That's just fear driven. And I
Yeah.
understand that people work long, hard hours and they come home and they just kind of want that person that they can sit around and watch their favorite show with and talk about their day with. But I would say, again, it is worth it. It is so worth it. If you can just stick it out and wait for the right person, you'll be so glad you did.
Yeah. Well, the other part too that I think is worth mentioning is I remember I lived with somebody, the first guy that I ever lived with, and I was so upset like half the time. And I remember saying to my dad, because he just let me figure it out. I mean, it must have been really hard for him to watch me go through this.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if I was being unreasonable. Am I asking too much of this relationship? I wasn't. It didn't make him a bad guy. We just weren't a good, we weren't, up until he passed away, we were friendly, but we had no business being together. And I just think that that's interesting that a lot of people probably think, well, I'm just asking too much.
Well, I do think our culture has changed quite a bit. We used to marry without often even knowing the person, and it was for survival of the bloodline, and it was to honestly help around the farm, and you had kids and, the homestead, and it was much more practical. You had friends, you had church, you had your kind of other environments where you could get some of your other needs met. Women got together to knit or to make pottery or do the things that they did. But nowadays, we're so encapsulated that a lot of times I think women expect their husband to be their best friend, their chef, their, honeydew person, to be their handyman around the house. They've got to be all these things, their counselor, their whatever. And that's not necessarily fair. So we do put unrealistic expectations on our partner. Both men and women do this, I think. So that's just one thing to be aware of. And then the other thing is, the more you're whole in yourself and you find those outlets, really good friends or groups or places where you can kind of explore your own feelings and be the rest of yourself, you're not only going to be bringing a better you back to your relationship, but you're not relying on him to be your everything. That's a lot of burden on one person.
It really is. And what happens if something happens? I mean, for me, it's okay to rely on other people for things. And I also need to know that I can do it myself and I can take care of me I can do it. I know I can do it. Would I prefer not to? Yeah, I would. I prefer to have a partner. But yeah, I like that, not expecting one person to be all things. We are almost out of time, actually. So I'm just curious if there's any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience, maybe something you haven't shared before, or if you want to reiterate something, that's obviously great too.
I really think it all goes back to rediscovering yourself and painting a clear vision and picture for who you want to be, and set aside all limiting beliefs of, well, I don't know how to do that, or I don't have that training, or any of the things that might get in your way. If you can just give yourself the space and the freedom to think, if there was absolutely no limits, this is what my life would look like. And just dream like we did when we were little kids. Write it down, look for pictures, build that vision, because to your point earlier, you'll start thinking of ways to do it. The how will arrive, but if you can't get excited about a vision that then ultimately will lead to your purpose and then inform your decisions, it kind of makes life miserable, because you're just floating around and you're waiting for things to happen to you and react. So I say be more proactive and preempt the things that come along with a decision on who you want to be, and then start being that person as early as today.
Oh, I love that. Start now. The quickest way to fail is to start tomorrow. Anyway, Andrea, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure everybody else did as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you again soon.